Well, thanks for coming back. My name is Bob Cummins, and I'm going to talk to you about behaviouralising trust and cooperation. Behaviouralising isn't actually a word, right? It was just made up for this. But it sounds good, doesn't it? And I think you get what it means, hopefully. Or hopefully you will by the end of the presentation. My third time back, I think. Second time on the main stage, a wee bit of breakout. Didn't obviously make the initial list. And that's something you can never now do, isn't it? Make the initial list of the first conference, of course. Ever in the presence of gods, shall we say. Okay, so my company, Glenn and I have known each other for years, and we daren't count how many years it is now, but the grey hairs and the baldness and the beard, and me now being a granddad, and maybe telling you how long ago that was. Long time ago that we first met, and my background is construction. As is Glenn's, obviously. And in 2013, though, I set up SODAC, having stumbled across behavioural science. I started off life as a chain lad, actually, on a construction project, a roads job, and moved into engineering, and then did a bit of health and safety. Always had engineering at my heart, though. And now I think I'm kind of a behavioural engineer, if you like. So stumbled across this chap that was teaching behavioural science. And it was round about the time that behavioural safety was rearing its head. And that's about the only thing that behavioural science and behavioural safety have in common is the word behaviour. And behavioural science is a real thing, whereas behavioural safety isn't. Okay, but that's a different lecture. Behavioural science it massively appealed to my engineering side because every behaviour is measurable and every behaviour is caused. And it cannot be any other way, actually, if you look at the fundamentals of how the universe works. But we tend to forget this as humans because we live in this kind of land and area that doesn't feel as though things are caused, and it feels as though we have full agency around our own behaviours and free will, of which we don't, and of which that's another lecture, different lecture as well, not this one. But it's a fascinating subject for sure. So hopefully maybe whet your appetite with a wee bit of this. And because it's behavioural science, it's applicable to anything as well that's got humans in it. And we've heard a number of mentions of the word behaviour or behavioural things today as well, and also trust and cooperation. So within that theme, let's see what we have for you. So Glenn asked me to put something together around ACT in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. And this is one of the more infamous clauses within the NEC contract. And it was introduced into NEC 2 version of the contracts back in 1995, following recommendations from the Latham report. Oh, this is all what Glenn tells me anyway. This is not my area of expertise. But it was brought in to encourage a culture and an obligation to act in this way. But what does it actually mean? What does it look like, and how can we get more of it? Okay, and so that's what we're going to that's what I'm hopefully talk about today. But first, a wee story about my grandma, right? So you weren't expecting this, and it's a story that my dad told me about a conversation he had with his mum, because that's my grandma, and it was back in the 1950s, and she won in a raffle a box of tea bags. Okay, and she'd never seen a tea bag before. And she was used to drinking tea as a leaf through a strainer. So she got this box of individual tea bags. And on the box it said, it says individual tea bags for that perfect cuppa was on the side of the box. And so my grandma and my dad both puzzled over the strange contents of the box for a while. And before deciding that the tea bags were actually individual portions of tea, ready for you to cut open and then put in the strainer. And so this is what she did for a while before she actually saw an advert, not on the telly, because she didn't have one, but a poster of a tea bag being dipped into the cup. And it was a light bulb moment from my grandma of, oh, right, that's how you use them. And actually, though, the point of the story is this is a common problem with behaviour. We think that we are being clear with what we want. We think everyone else has the same definition of the words, that we are using, but definitions are learned, and they're learned from experience, not from reading words. You have to tie the word to the experience for the connection to be made. And the easiest way to do this is to demonstrate the specific behaviour you want, not for them to just be instructions, if you like. But that's not all. Trust and cooperation are not even actual behaviours. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. A behaviour is, you best think of a behaviour as an action. Okay, so this is a set of actions here, and they are behaviours, right? So trust and cooperation, well, you might still be thinking, well, they are actions, but they're not. They are high-level words of which actions then fit under, yeah? But they're not actual actions themselves. And as such, you cannot measure trust and cooperation until you actually turn them into something you can measure, and which is all that exists, by the way, is actions, not these other things that we create. Most behaviours, as I said, are learned from experience, from copying, not from reading dictionaries. You know, that's not how you learned the language that you've got. You didn't connect the words that you have to the actions that you know by reading a dictionary. You learnt them as you grew up through the words that your parents or other people said to you associated with your actions, with your behaviours. Okay, so language is actually a construct that fits around reality, but often we mistake language for actual reality itself. So if we are going to behaviouralise trust and cooperation, we have to take it down a level into actual actions so that can be measured and then demonstrated and modelled, and then we might actually get somewhere. So if we're looking at actions, though, we have to look at what kind of drives actions. And behavioural science says that our actions are in response to the environment. Okay, so our actions, our behaviours, are an interpretation of what is appropriate for the environment we are in at the time the behaviour occurs. Okay, so if you went across and you had cake, then your behaviour of having cake was the appropriate behaviour for you to do in the environment that you were just in for your past experience based on what you then had in front of you, and then that drove your behaviour to have cake. And there would be some people that didn't have cake, whether that was because John ate the cake, and 2 cakes, and more than that cake, and you couldn't get any, or whether it was because actually you had a rule against having cake at 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay? But in most of your cases, you weren't intending to have cake at 11 or 11:15, but the fact there was cake there and other people were having cake made it more likely that you had cake. Yeah? Fair enough? Yeah, should get it. So our environment actually drives our behaviour more than actually us as individuals. And this is happening constantly, that the environment around us is the thing that's prompting our actions and the things that we're doing. And different environments get different behaviours. So what behavioural science says is if you want a different behaviour out of someone, you change the environment around them, and then you will get a different behaviour. You don't try and change the person. In fact, changing the person or trying to change the person has very little effect because the person's behaviour is in response to the environment. So you have to change the environment, and then you start to get a different behaviour. So you have different behaviours on holiday than you obviously do in the boardroom. So there's a picture that Olivia sent me of Glenn on holiday. No, he's the one in the shirts and tie. You can see it if you look at it this simply, that yes, you would not go into the boardroom in a pair of Speedos, or if you did, you would feel very awkward, hopefully, and you would get some very strange looks. And also, you would not sit on the beach with a shirt and tie, again, for the same reason, that your behaviours calibrate to the actual environment you're in. So if you want behaviours of trust and cooperation, not only do we have to take them down to a measurable level, they then have to create the environment around the people that actually are the things to prompt these specific behaviours, and they are as specific as eating cake or wearing Speedos. So what is the behaviour here of this chap? And if you say things like reckless, multitasking, careless, dangerous, those kind of things, you're not actually describing the behaviours of this person. You are using what we call labels, right? So reckless, multitasking, dangerous, whatever it is that pops into mind when you first see this person doing stuff, they are still not behaviours. They are high-level descriptions of what you are seeing and then placing it against a judgmental rule or basis, if you like, your past experience. But what do you actually see here? Does anybody want to say? Yep.
He's having a breakfast conference call while driving.
Breakfast conference call. Yes, one of your guys. No. Well, take it even closer, even more detailed than that. So he's holding a donut. Yep, and he's holding the donut close to his mouth. He's not actually, you can't even say he's eating it yet because he's just holding it against his mouth. You don't even know if he's driving. Yeah, he could actually just be sitting in a lay-by. He's got his phone between his ear and his shoulder, and in his left hand he's holding a cup. We don't even know what's in it. Those are the measurable, undisputable components of what we can see in front of us. Yeah, those are the behaviours, the actions that he's doing. Anything else, so things like multitasking, again, dangerous, those kind of things, are judgments based on what you saw, then very quickly wrap them into your rule book about what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable, if you like. So a behaviour, okay, is something that is an action. It's what we say and do. It's objective. It can be measured. It's exact. It's factual. And it's actually happening, right? And trust and cooperation are not behaviours until we turn them into behaviours. So trust and cooperation fall into this category. They are labels. They are subjective. They are open to interpretation. They're opinion-based. They're judgmental. And they could easily, therefore, be disputed. Okay, because they're not specifics. Some popular labels that you hear at work and in other areas are things like work safely, take care, follow the process, communicate effectively, act in the spirit of trust and cooperation, and work to the contract. None of these are as specific as we think until we take them to the point of being something that we can measure. Okay? If we just leave them at this level, they are meaningless. Yeah, they will be open to different people's interpretation. And your interpretation of what is correct comes from your past experiences. And if you think about, how many folk are in this room, Glenn, roughly? 140. Different upbringings, different experiences, different backgrounds, all slightly different versions of your definitions of words that you share, that you believe you share, but really you don't because you are drawing on your past experiences of those words until you can get it into something that is actually measurable. Now imagine if we use this kind of language of labels in contract specifications. If we just said that the concrete should be good quality, yeah, we'd get all sorts of things. If we just said that things should be an appropriate height, right, which of course we don't. If we just asked for good ramped access, we can see this quite easily. And as construction people, you should see this more easily than others, that we actually should be very clear with what we're asking for when it comes to trust and cooperation. So one of the first things we should do is purposely create trust and cooperation behaviours, as in outline them, as in say what they should be. And it's only possible if you're specific and pinpointed about what they are and what they are not. And this is actually more difficult than we think. Because we live in this land of labels so much, it's actually quite difficult to be specific about the actual actions that we want people to do. But also, because there are so many actions all the time, it's impossible to pinpoint and dictate all of them. To personally create trust and collaborative behaviours, though, it is necessary to start with something specific. Now, Glenn referred to some of his secret articles before, and here is one specifically about trust and cooperation. And it's a really good starting point. So if you didn't stick your hand up having read one, or you haven't read this one, then have a read of this one. And there's some really good starting points for pinpointing the do's and don'ts. So trust and cooperation is this kind of thing, and it is not this kind of thing, right? And what you can use that for then is to start to have conversations with your team about, well, which ones do we want to have, and which ones do we not want to have, and then creating, if you like, a rule book for your project, for your work. So yeah, please dig this one out and have a look. A good place to start, though, about pinpointing trust and cooperation is with labels, right? Because they're labels themselves, so a generalization is okay to start with. And often when we're helping clients go through this process of behaviouralising labels, we get them to kind of tap into some of their emotional senses, if you like, and also visual senses, and say, right, what kind of things in a project that was demonstrating trust and cooperation would you see, hear, feel, and say? And it's a really nice starting point as a technique, just to get them to kind of like, well, in this environment, we would see this, or hear this, or feel this, or say this. Again, what will you do or not do? And who will do what, when, and how. And you can see by this, you're starting to then move into almost project managing trust and cooperation to something that you can actually purposely create. And again, I can't emphasize this as much. If you don't take it to this level, you're just like asking for everybody's different interpretation of those words. So this is one of the cards. It's a simple card that we use in exercises that we run, and you can do it for anything. It doesn't have to be with trust and cooperation. You can do it with any topic as a very good starting point. So we did this with a contractor, two contractors and a client. It's actually Scottish Water and 2 specialist contractors. And we gave them all these cards as part of a workshop we were doing. And we said, right, can you write some cards for that describe a really badly run project? What would you see, hear, feel, and say? And also for a really well-run project, what kind of things would you see, feel, hear, and say? And this is what they came up with. And just picking on one of these. So this is from the bad side. So team members are sad, angry, blaming each other for mistakes, negative feedback, depressed at the thought of going to work, and firefighting on the project, and shouting and negative discussions. But these are still quite labelly, if you like. They're not specific. But, okay, it's a start. We can kind of understand what this person's definition of this is like. And this would definitely fall into the category of a bad project, wouldn't it? So it's almost, you take people through this continuum of, right, start maybe with labels and then work towards more pinpointing as we go along. But first we got them to describe what a well or a better run project was like, and this was the same person's thoughts around that. So happy team, lots of positive discussions within the team, positive feedback, happy to go to work, proud to project, proud to deliver the team, positive discussions, and laughter. So actually laughter is a behaviour. That's something you could definitely measure. But the rest of them, positive discussion is open to interpretation, so it's not a behaviour, it's a judgment. Positive feedback, again, it's open to interpretation, it's not judgment. So these are not behaviours. But they're a start. They're a start to then this 3-entity joint venture agreeing what is good and what they want to strive for and what isn't. I'm going to give you some more examples of those as well, just as they moved into more behavioural terms, but it's actually human nature, and as we heard in the presentations around the COVID stuff, there was trust and cooperation happened. And it's human nature to trust and cooperate. It's a natural human trait, but only within groups that consider themselves to be together. And as well as pinpointing the behaviours that you want, you need to create a group of people that feel stronger together than, so if it's a project, feel stronger together than their parent companies, if you like. And then that will really help get the trust and cooperation within that group, because they're naturally then working together for their specific goal. But if they feel more aligned to their parent companies, then the trust and cooperation will happen more with their parent companies rather than the project, right? Which makes sense, yeah? So you really have to try and create that and foster that environment on site then, which brings everybody together for that purpose of building that project, which can easily be done if it's done purposely and done regularly, and also, though, mitigated when the risks and the stress become prevalent on the project as well. Another thing we do with our clients when we're behaviouralising stuff is to use a process called a pre-mortem, which some of you may come across, and it's a really good exercise to do at the start of a project with the team to predict failure. Okay, and so you say that the project has not been successful, and you say why, And then you say, well, how the failure could be mitigated, but you ask each organisation what they could do to mitigate the failure for their partner. So you don't ask the actual organisation, Scottish Water, how will you mitigate it for yourself? You ask then the contractor how they will mitigate failure for their counterpart, if you like. So you're starting to build this collective responsibility, if you like, for mitigating failure, which is even before you start to build it for success. And then you can push for more pinpointed behaviours in the specifics that they will do to start actually reducing the potential failure. You can then say, well, what specific behaviours do you want more of, and what do you want less of? And so some of the ones that they came up with here were less of using laptops. And what does that say? Phones, yeah, within the meeting. Very specific. So now we're getting to an actual behaviour. And you may think, but it was really annoying some people and distracting for them. And some people say, well, we're taking notes on them. So, well, maybe take notes on something else just now so I can have your attention rather than playing solitaire. But you can see there's a NEC one there, unsubstantiated CEs. Now maybe unsubstantiated is open to interpretation, but at least we're getting closer to an actual behaviour they want less of. And stop referencing previous projects, right? Oh, well, on this project we did this, It's very annoying. So we said, well, we're going to have less of that, please. And if we have less of that, then we're closer to a collaborative and cooperative project. The ones that they, identifying negative trigger events as well. So we get them to do an exercise around incendiary devices to talk about, as a group, what things will get your back up and describe them in a pinpointed way. So we're always pushing them to be pinpointed, to be specific, rather than just saying the kind of labelly stuff. And here's some examples of what they said here. Let's just have a quick read of those. So some labels, but also some specifics. So delivering bad news via email. Delivering bad news late. Now you'd maybe have to define what late was, and you'd have to maybe define what bad news was, but at least they're attempting to then create this rule book, if you like, of things that they really don't want as a project. And then how you put out the fires as well. Well, talk to each other. Keep talking. Accept the bad news. Easier said than done, eh? But again, they're starting to move towards stuff that they can agree on. And then what we did with them next was to create a behavioural charter. But I don't mean like a behavioural charter that is just kind of full of empty plaudits and signatures and, says trust and cooperation on it again. They actually then use this to then build in some specific behaviours that specific people would then do on a regular basis. So Amy, obviously the contractor, not a person. Amy PM will issue weekly progress reports. Amy QS will issue weekly cost forecasts. GC will attend the Scottish Water office weekly for face-to-face and SW team. So these are, I would suggest, over and above some of the things that are in a contract and specific to these people with specific names. But more importantly, they're measurable. Yeah, now they might not be perfect, but at least they're their attempt at actually saying how they will start to act in the spirit of trust and cooperation and run the project in order to then mitigate any incendiary devices and also failures that might happen around the project. But unfortunately, even this isn't enough, right, to actually make it happen. Getting it to the stage of pinpointed specificness, if you like, is not enough to make behaviours happen. And even if we are really prescriptive about what we ask people, the instruction to do something, the setting of expectation to do something is only just the starting point. And it takes a lot of effort just to get there, which is why most of the time we don't do it, to be fair. But even if we do spend the time there, we then get lulled into the false sense of security that, well, I've told you what to do, therefore you should do it, yeah? And the reason we get lulled into this false sense of security is in our home lives, although it might not feel like it, most of the time you can say things to your kids and get them to do stuff. okay, maybe not once they're teenagers, but certainly before that, you know, things like come to the table, you know, go to bed, or maybe after 10 times, but at least they actually respond to your requests, right? And so we get kind of hoodwinked into this as how the world works, but it doesn't work when we're actually working with other people that we don't actually have that much control over, if you like. So we have to do something else, and this is where it goes back to the environment. So we've created a list, if you like, of pinpointed behaviours that we want, so we've set that expectation, but now we actually have to create the environment that then supports these. And also, trust is measured behaviourally by the correlation between antecedents and consequences. Now, an antecedent and a consequence is a specific behavioural term. An antecedent is, it's a word out of the dictionary, and it just means something that comes before something else, right? And consequence as well is a word out of a dictionary. But in terms of behavioural science, what an antecedent means is a stimulus. It means something that precedes the behaviour that you actually want. And a consequence, in behavioural science terms, if you want the behaviour to happen, a consequence is a consequence that supports the actual behaviour happening. It's not a negative consequence, right? When we hear the word consequence, we tend to think of negative connotations, yeah? But actually the word consequence, if you want a behaviour to happen, there has to be a consequence in place that supports the behaviour happening. Now this is a fundamental behavioural law, that for a behaviour to happen, there has to be a stimulus, a prompt, a trigger at the front, then there has to be this supportive consequence just immediately as the behaviour occurs to make the behaviour more likely to happen in the future. Okay? And trust, in the behavioural terms, is when those two things align. So where your expectation happens, the A and the antecedent, and when actually the reinforcing consequence happens. So when you took the bite of cake, when did you experience the taste of sweetness? Straight away, right? Okay? And you were guaranteed, you thought, because of your past experiences of tasting cake, that then the next bite would provide you with the same hit of taste experience, yeah? So you continued to eat the cake until there was no more cake, in most cases. And of course, in some cases, there was more cake, yeah? So your behaviour was driven by the results that you got, but in line with the expectation that you expected. So you trusted that the cake would taste nice the second time because of your experience that you just experienced and also your past experiences of having cake. Now, it could have been that the cake was, baked on purpose to be horrendous, right? And that would have been really quite funny in testing your trust of cake. But it wasn't, thankfully. So if you think about trust from the behavioural perspective, it is the correlation between these two things, antecedents and consequences. Now, if you think about people, those who always do what they say are trusted, right? And those who do not are not trusted. Yeah? Now, that kind of sounds obvious as well. But this is why it's careful to choose the antecedents that you want to use as prompts to prompt performance or to prompt behaviours. So if you agree or if you get people to agree to stuff that's not possible, right, that already sets them up to failure and then try and measure it, then you will have less trust because it's not possible for this person to deliver. So you have to pick your kind of expectations carefully. And an unkept promise by a manager or a leader causes the person to not only to distrust the manager, but distrust the company as well, right? So if the company is making statements, bold statements that can't be kept, then you're very sensitive to looking for this correlation between the antecedents and the consequences, or the expectation and the result, if you like. And if those aren't met, then it's not just the person you don't trust, but it's the company as well. So how do you make the behaviour actually more likely? Well, communicating the agreed behaviours. So we've got the behaviours, we've done the behaviouralisation, if you like. We need to communicate them, make sure everybody's on the same page, set that expectation of this is what we will do on this project and this is what we will not do on this project. This is who will do what when. We need to measure compliance to the agreed behaviours, perhaps weekly in some cases, if they are weekly or if they're daily behaviours. Because if you just state something and then don't measure it, then you're providing no opportunity for monitoring, but you're also providing no opportunity for reinforcing the behaviours that you actually want. And when you share the results with the people that are involved, you can then start to see, well, this is how we are doing on our trust and cooperation kind of monitor, if you like. We thought this would be easy, but maybe it's not, and this is where we can actually support people. We can reinforce the good stuff that we're getting right, and and then we can support the areas that are lacking. And we can remove some obstacles, make those behaviours easier, we can provide some assistance, and we can increase the focus. But the top bit there, the communicate and the agreed behaviours, all this slide is like after you've done the behaviouralisation of the trust and cooperation. This is why it's really difficult to actually get this to happen. Not because it's really difficult, but because it takes many steps to actually do, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. Okay? But again, this is what we do when we're building stuff. We specify it, we then measure its progress, we report back on its progress, and it builds railways, you know. It builds high speed too. It builds whatever we're building. This is the same technique. It's project managing. It's breaking it down into component parts and then measuring behaviour, creating the environment where the actual actions that we want actually happen. This is the antecedent behaviour consequence slide. So this really is at the heart of any behaviour. You have to have triggers for it. You have to have the specific behaviour mentioned in the middle, and then you have to have this reinforcing loop that then supports the behaviour, the sweetness taste from the cake. So as soon as that behaviour happens that you've asked for in the contract happens, don't just take it for granted. Don't just say nothing. You know, reinforce the actual behaviour that you want, and you will get more of it. There's a problem in construction, in many businesses, that we focus on the stuff that we don't want. Behavioural science says that if we focus, whatever we focus on, we'll get more of it, right? Because by focusing on things, you start to reinforce them. So whatever you focus on, whatever you turn your attention to, you will get more of those things. In dog training, I see you didn't want to see this one coming either, did you? Right? In dog training, what you now, has anybody got a puppy? Come on, somebody must have a puppy statistically, yeah. Right? So in puppy training, what you're now encouraged to do is not what my father used to do, and probably my grandma, is you're not meant to rub their nose in the crap when they do it on the floor now. You're meant to completely ignore it. And what you're meant to do when you get the behaviour you want out of the puppy is you throw a friggin' party, right? Every time, right? And the puppy learns very quickly that, oh man, I'm meant to crap in the garden. Hey, I'll do that more, right? Because I get a treat and I get the attention of the person that is focusing on me. Oh, I've crapped on the floor. I didn't get any attention, right? And so reinforcing the behaviours you want, focusing on the behaviours you want, and I'm not saying completely ignore the behaviours you don't want. It's good to call them out, but don't spend a disproportionate amount of time on them. Spend a disproportionate amount of time on the behaviours that you actually want more of, and you will magically start to get more of them, right? But only if you have pinpointed them in the first place and you can measure them. Okay, so we have to maintain trust around what we have agreed. So if you agree something, you have to then maintain that trust through that behavioural kind of correlation between the A's and the C's. It's no good telling a badly behaved child that Santa won't come if you actually just give them the presents every year, even if they are badly behaved. So what you need to do is give the kids no presents, right? No, of course not. So that's not good either. But just don't make the promise at all. Don't say things. Don't give false promises. That you can't follow through on. And that is something that we are possibly not so good at as well. So, of course, the leader of the project and the local leaders have a big role to play in this, a pivotal role in the creation of an environment that supports trust and cooperation. So you have to pinpoint the behaviours that you want, and you're best to do this as a team, so that and there are different behaviours at different parts of the team, of course, because different people have different roles. So every department, if you like, within that project should have a set of specific things that are their trust and cooperation behaviours, and they should be different because they have different roles. Model the behaviours. Now, I don't mean pose, with a bit of cake. I mean actually demonstrate the behaviour that you want, and use the opportunity to demonstrate trust and cooperation at every opportunity. Right? Now, this is even things like turning up to meetings on time. So imagine if you run an organisation or a project and you say, right, the meeting starts at 10, the progress meeting starts at 10, and everybody turns up at 10 past 10, right? That is a direct insight into how you run the organisation. It's a direct violation of trust and cooperation. It's something that everybody can see, but nobody speaks about because they think, well, it's just a meeting. But meetings happen on a daily basis, right? Emails happen on a daily basis. These are the areas that start to kind of erode trust and cooperation when the expectation doesn't meet the actual end result, if you like. Measure feedback and reinforce the behaviours you want more of. Okay, I've said that already. Okay, call out the anti-behaviours, those you want less of. Build a team of collective responsibility. Seek out and remove obstacles. Make the behaviours easy to happen. The trust behaviours, right? If a behaviour is happening, there's a reason for it. If a behaviour isn't happening, there's a reason for it, right? You are perfectly designed to get the behaviours that you're getting just now. That is not just something like cliche or nice to say, that is a fact. Behavioural science is so specific that every behaviour that happens is a reaction to the environment the person is in. If you're getting trust and cooperation type behaviours at the moment, it's because your project is designed to. If you're not, it's because your project is designed to. So you need to purposely design the project, the environment that the people are in, to get the kind of trust and cooperation behaviours that you want. And then when you do, at every opportunity, throw that party for the dog. Throw a success, register the completion of the behavioural charter, the compliance to the charter, or just people turning up on time to meetings. It sounds silly, but if you let things slip, right, then who knows where it will go next. Act in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. It's easy to say, but it's definitely harder to do, right? But hopefully I've given you some tips on how you can move towards a more pinpointed, measurable way. These slides and the words that I've mostly spoken are available, should you want them and stuff. And yeah, that's me. Thank you very much for listening.
Certainly a fascinating topic. And isn't Bob lucky I ordered cake? He'd have been done in 10 minutes without cake. Cake and crap, that was what I took from that talk. Any question now? We could talk for ages, but we'll just take a couple of questions with the time we've got. So I'll take one from Rob, if there's anyone else who's got a burning question. Anyone else? So we'll take Rob and Neil at the front.
We heard a question earlier about the gap following COVID-19 and how you get the work from home. Do you think all these additions through behavioural science and trying to get trust and cooperation nailed down actually provide that bridge immediately? You don't have to touch the contract, because if you get trust and cooperation properly recorded, all of those problems drop away.
It was certainly interesting. That slide that came up that Matthew put up about the trust and cooperation just happened. And it was like, I was like, oh shit, I've just in my presentation that you have to purposely design it. But then it was purposely designed with the fact that COVID happened. And I think that was an example of, well, everybody did have the same goal. All of a sudden, everybody had that same goal. It was united. And that it's definitely is a human trait that it's natural in your in-group. And so that is, I think that's there's a shortcut to it, but that's maybe the quickest way to get it, is to create a group that is together more than they are apart, right? And then you will have more of it happening. You still have to say what the goal was. So obviously with COVID, there was a goal, many goals that were aligned and communicated effectively in most cases, not in all cases. I mean, there was lots of labels battered around as well. But yes, I think those parts of the ingredients, that collective goal to achieve something, can speed up the trust and cooperation. And of course, you can see it in joint ventures that are still heavily pulled apart by their respective parent boards. That's when the trust and cooperation doesn't happen. Yeah.
And a quick question for Neil.
Hi there. I mean, there's a lot of questions I could ask. I always find when you stand up and talk, it's usually one of the most insightful parts of the day for me, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Very simply, and I'm not sure if you know, but the example you used from Scottish Water, how did they get on? Did you find out later how? And I don't mean in terms of was it on time and to budget and all that kind of stuff, which is important, but as a team, how did they get on from that point on, from that intervention?
That project's getting on relatively okay. When I say the words, you're designed to get what you get, that design to get what you get starts right at the tender stage, right at the contract, stage, and you can smell a bad job right from then, can't you? In most cases, because people are pitted against each other, or they're pitted to work in a joint venture that might be successful. So that one, yes. Other ones that were already difficult from a design point of view, from a cost point of view, from a scheduling point of view, have the ingredients that make it less likely that people will trust and cooperate, sort of thing. So, just because you've got an enlightened client, in some cases, there's still pockets of the good stuff and the not so good stuff.
Excellent.